Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, sometimes you've got to go home to take stock of who you are. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more, as always. My name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion, because that's just how we like to do it. And well, if you like how we do it, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to the podcast. You're listening, so you're halfway there already. But you can find us basically on Amazon, Google, Spotify, Apple, basically wherever you get your podcasts. And also you can find every single one of our episodes archived over at our YouTube channel. Plus, it'd be pretty great if you'd follow us on social media too. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest movie news and reviews from the world of television, film, and basically anything the moving image has to offer. We love writing about it, and we love it when you read about it, so come pay us a visit. On this episode, we are continuing a bit of a thread, because we are talking about the Canadian Film Festival once more, and a film that is playing this coming Saturday night at 9 p.m. and midnight Eastern as a part of the Canadian Film Festival, and it is called Range Roads from writer-director Kyle Thomas, and it's a coming home story. It's a family drama, but it's when her parents are killed in a sudden car accident. Television actor Frankie King, excellently played by Alana Hawley Purvis, returns to her hometown in rural Alberta to face the tragedy after being estranged from her family for 20 years. As she struggles to reconnect with her truculent brother Grayson, played excellently by Joe Perry, old wounds are reopened and family secrets uncovered. It's a story of grief, longing, and really ultimately forgiveness. And it's a film that kind of understands sort of the messy, complex beast that is family, which is something that we can all relate to. And we got the distinct pleasure to sit down with Kyle to talk about the film. And we asked about sort of the inspiration for it and writing for his actors and just sort of putting all this kind of stuff together and sort of dealing with the complexities of being an artist in a really weird time when content is bombarding us left, right, and center. But it was an interesting talk with our man here, and I certainly hope you enjoy it, because I think writer-directors like Kyle Thomas are definitely going to be the future of Canadian cinema, because he's telling a real story. He's telling a very relatable story. It's very humanistic, and it's something that audiences can really relate to on so many different levels, and I do recommend you check it out. But first off, check out our talk with Kyle, because it is most certainly a good one. Congratulations on the movie, man. Like, I really enjoyed it. It really was sort of I don't know, because I mean, I've been in that situation myself, sort of the leaving, the coming home. It's always a little awkward. There's always those stresses around there, and it felt very honest and it felt very genuine. I guess walk me through sort of the inspiration on your end for telling this story.
Yeah, well, I think that there were two things. One of them was sort of the relationship that I had with Alana Hawley Purvis and Joe Perry, who had been in my previous film. And that was sort of the starting point, because I had these two amazing actors that I'd worked with before, and we wanted to do something together again. So, and this was about 6 years ago, right? So we started there, and we really built these characters from the ground up. And I knew I developed this situation where, okay, both the parents died, she had to return home. That was about it. And everything was kind of built out of this research and kind of a back and forth over many years between Joe, Alana, and I, in order to make these characters real and to make the situation believable, right? So yeah, and ultimately, you're right. We wanted to tell an honest story. I wanted this to be relatable. I wanted, people to be able to connect with it and recognize sort of situations in their life, whether it's coming home or dealing with the death of family member, but to be able to connect on one of those levels. So
No, and I mean it really comes through in the work, and I mean even watching it, I'm like, he must have written it for them, just
Yeah.
because everyone was so in tune with the material, and I mean it's a rare sort of privilege to get where they both on board to sort of spend the time to develop these characters.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I'm very lucky to be able to have them jump on board like that, and we'd various things from like Google Docs where we just start writing points and okay, this is what I think happened to him or her, and at one point it was a drastically different film and their relationship was different. But another point also is that we wanted to create a movie about a brother and sister relationship, like a sibling relationship, which we also found as we were starting to do some research, that's not something that's that common in cinema either, that we see that there's no archetype necessarily for the brother sister relationship like there is sort of a romantic relationship or a relationship with your parents. So that was an interesting endeavor as well.
No, for sure, and I mean it just struck me the second you said that. You're right. The brother sister dynamic has never really been dived into. I mean,
Yeah.
at what point in the entire process did you guys kind of know, wait a minute, this not a lot of people have done this before?
No, it was actually late. It was later. It was like, wow, just before we were actually starting to shoot that we were like, wait a second, like this, we're telling something that hasn't been done. And then we kind of had another aha moment when the film was finished and we saw it and we're like, oh, that rings true. A lot of, you know, um, the dynamic between the two of them, a lot of people can relate to that. And the more we started talking about it afterwards, um, there are so many different levels and layers to a brother sister or sister sister brother brother relationship that we could have worked forever on on that, right? There's so much more work to be done there.
No, I mean, I guess that dovetails into another question because I mean, obviously, when you're on set and you're shooting, like someone has to lead the ship, otherwise nothing's going to get done. I'm kind of curious. Were you guys sort of very precious to the words on the page, like when you were in the moment shooting, or did you allow for sort of them playing in the moment as you're trying to do shots and get everything going?
Absolutely. Like, I'm definitely not precious. From even before, and many drafts in the script, I'd sit down with Alana and she's like, the scene just doesn't feel like this is part of Frankie's journey. I'm like, okay, let's talk about it and let's make your case and I'll rewrite it. Like, and so we did a lot of adapting. And while we were on set, actually, we would rewrite almost entire scenes. We would rearrange words and take things out right on the fly, which is part of that. That's kind of exciting for me. Like, I'm not precious about the words, and doing that work on set is really rewarding. And if it means changing it, because I don't want to force somebody to say a line if it's not going to be natural. We want this movie to be real in a
Sure.
sense. So yeah, no, I was kind of do whatever you want as long as it serves the characters in the story.
How important is it to be able to have collaborators like this at this level? Because I mean, as much as people think it happens all the time in the movie business, it kind of doesn't.
No. No, it really doesn't. And I mean, this is more like a theater
Yeah.
process in a sense. And often, actors will fly in the night before and then they're on set and they're there for a day or two and then they fly home. Like, I mean, that's more often than not how it is. So the fact that we had this time to have A, worked together before, and B, be able to have a long development process just means that we trust each other that much more. It means that we've done the work. We know how to communicate. There's no breaking down barriers, and we kind of are all friends as well. So that also helps. It just makes it really efficient to dive right into the scene when you're on set.
That must make it for an interesting dynamic, especially when you bring in someone like Nicole for it, obviously a very pivotal scene, but she hasn't been there for the entire process. And does it make for a different atmosphere, or does it like how do you sort of roll a very key important part of the story sort of in, especially when maybe you're only shooting with them for a day or two?
Yeah, and that is a bit more difficult. Both Nicole and Chad. I mean, Nicole was there for a day and a half, and Chad was there for 3 days, I think. And yeah, it does kind of change the dynamic. But they're both, I mean, professionals in their own right. And so, actually, when Nicole came, we really workshopped the scene right then and there. I mean, our schedule was so packed that I could couldn't even go have dinner with her. Like, just, it was so tight. So we had to do a lot of that work right on set. But I mean, she was incredibly professional, and yeah, we were able to make the scene work right then and there.
Awesome. Now, I mean, we live in a fugue state right now, and it feels like a weird time to be talking about a movie at a festival. But like, how important is it sort of for you to be able to get films out on the festival circuit right now, and just to be able to get audiences to see them, especially when maybe you've got captive eyes for, and people can see your film in a way that maybe they wouldn't have been able to see beforehand?
Yeah, obviously, it's these are difficult times, and difficult choices had to be made both on the side of filmmakers, producers, and film festivals, just in terms of
Yeah.
how they're going to present things. So, we were, okay, do we wait? Do we hold back? And what it came down to is, I wanted to get this movie out there, and I think that, especially with COVID and everybody having gone on this roller coaster ride over the past year, that this is a film that they can maybe connect with, maybe more than ever, in a sense, because we've all had to adapt and make a lot of changes to who we are, and to our living situations, our work situations, and all of that. So I think that idea of kind of stepping back, checking yourself, and making sure that you're okay, and that who you are and where you're going, and finding a path. I mean, I think that might resonate more now than ever. So I think it's as good a time as any, really.
No, for sure. And I mean, I have to reference the poster behind you. People won't be able to see it because
Oh,
we're only using the
yeah,
audio, but
yeah.
Valley Below, love the film. But between this and that, there are definitely some through lines, definitely in terms of the small town existence. And I'm kind of curious, what is it about that draws you in as a storyteller?
I'm fascinated every time I drive through a small town. First of all, from the aesthetics, the old buildings, the microcosm of a small town really fascinates me. It's because it is on a smaller scale, you can almost see everything a little bit better. You can kind of see the relationships. Whereas that's a lot harder to do in a metropolis, to try and wrap your head around everybody that's living in this space, and how they identify to where, the place that they live. So I've just always had a fascination. So there's that. I think that, especially in this film, I was exploring a little bit of this urban rural divide that is ever present.
Yeah.
Grayson representing one side and Frankie kind of representing the other. And I feel I moved to a small town last year, so I live about an hour north of Calgary now, and I love it. Like yeah, there's something about it that I'm drawn to, that I always kind of want to tell stories there. And plus, then there's like shooting in a small town, which is always a pleasure. Everyone wants to open their doors and be a part of it, and you can drive 2 minutes and get from one set to another. You don't have to worry about traffic. So there's a lot of pros.
Well, and I mean, it's an interesting dynamic too, because on one end, we can all relate to the person who wants to leave the small town and go to the big city and try new things and expand themselves. But at the same time, we can also relate to the person in the big city who misses the small town and wants to go back. It's one of those things that it's a really interesting love-hate relationship that I don't think gets enough appreciation on the screen sometimes, because
I
it's one
agree.
that we all struggle with.
For sure, I have. So that's why I'm living here. So
Now I'm curious, and I mean, this is something I always like to ask, just because, especially in this business, we all come to it as fans first. Like, nobody starts in this business not being a fan of it. And I'm kind of curious, thinking back for you, was there like a moment in your life, or maybe even a movie, that sort of, the light bulb went off in your head and you went, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to be a storyteller. I want to be a filmmaker.
yeah, I think there were probably two moments that I can recognize. And the
Yeah.
first one was just watching movies as a teenager and wanting to make movies. I mean, Scorsese and Tarantino, I kind of grew up in that time, and so they were big. They were really big for me. And then I went to film school, and I went to Concordia in Montreal, and boy, taking film studies courses and being able to watch some of the like foreign films from the 60s and 70s really opened my mind. Like I watched Cries and Whispers
Oh
from
wow, okay.
Bergman, and like that was just my jaw hit the floor, and I still to this day like I mean that's probably my favorite film. And so I think that being exposed to all of that cinema that I had no idea existed, because you can't rent that at the Blockbuster necessarily, and I wouldn't know about it really as a teenager who grew up on Scorsese and Tarantino. But so those are sort of the two moments that I went, oh my gosh, there's such a vast reservoir of storytelling and different types of films. And so yeah, those are the two moments I can identify.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned film school, because I mean, especially in watching your films, I kept thinking like, oh my God, this guy's kind of like Cassavetes is if he was Canadian. If he was Canadian. And that's kind of the vibe that I kept getting from these kind of stories. And I mean, it's important to tell these.
That's a compliment. Thank you.
That's
another big one for me too, Cassavetes.
These stories don't, like you say, they weren't getting the shelf space at Blockbuster back in the day. It's important that these things get made. And I'm kind of curious, for you as a storyteller and a filmmaker who has to exist in this swath of film content right now, like how do you sort of navigate the line between, okay, this is a story I can sell versus this is a story I want to tell?
Yeah, that's very hard. I think that that's something that I'm reckoning with now. I think more so than ever, having made two films that are really kind of true to my heart and to my aesthetics, and to like, I'm putting everything I have into it. But and then somebody will turn around and say, yeah, but it's not marketable. We can't market it because of A, B, and C, or you should have done this, or you should have done that. And that's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow, but it's kind of the reality of the situation. It's like I can keep making these films that really I go through war to sort of make them and to finance them and do that. And I think part of me will always still do that at some point. But I think I'm sort of at a turning point where I have to go, okay, maybe we should think about where this is going to land while I'm designing it a little bit. You know what I mean? As opposed to just following my gut. There's definitely a balance to be had there, and I'm sure that that's sort of my next journey. It's
that line between indie auteur and Marvel movie. I mean, there is a big space in between that you can play in for sure.
For sure, I'm ready to explore that a little, but and that it sort of relates to Range Roads. Like Frankie's at a crossroads, and that was part of me trying to navigate that as well, trying to understand like, hey, is this my idea of quote unquote success? Is this is this what I thought I would be doing? Are these the movies I thought I'd be making? And like just kind of questioning my life and career thus far in sort of the arts and entertainment. So her journey is a little bit my journey as well.
No, but I think you're absolutely right, because I mean, it is one of those things where you can stray a little bit and sort of lose focus on sort of where you thought you were going to be. But when you come back to sort of your core, family is family. And, you may not know them, you may not get along with them, but they're still fucking family. And that's kind of the whole point, that it's so important to sort of understand sort of the core of who you are as a person, which is what her journey really is. Totally. And you take us through it so beautifully. And I mean, I just think it's a great film. And I just want to say congratulations again. And thank you for the time today, man. This was fun.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm glad you liked the movie.
No, again, thanks. And like I said, man, thanks again for the time. And I'm bummed you're not doing proper festival. I always feel bad,
I know, the one thing about the one thing is just like, man, you put so much time and money and effort into getting that like nice 5.1 mix and like, and the color grade and everything to see it on and make the DCPs, and then a pandemic hits and you go, oh, and just being there with the audience, being able to like feel when they react to a certain moment. Those are important things for a filmmaker to be able to take that and understand that and be able to use that.
No, for sure.
It's
Yeah.
important. So we're missing that on this one. And, you know, hopefully it'll have a bit of a longer festival life. And if this whole thing gets a little bit better, maybe there will be a theatrical screening at some point later this year.
At least you get to do Q&A in your sweatpants, though. That's
totally. Hey, can't complain.
If there's one bonus, it's that.
Awesome, man.
All right.
Cool.
Again, thanks again for the time, and congratulations again on the movie.
Hey, no worries. Thanks a lot.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.